About a week ago, Christopher Nolan made his return to cinemas with his first film since 2023 in Oppenheimer, this being The Odyssey, based on Homer's The Odyssey, written almost 3,000 years ago. This film was filmed fully on IMAX cameras and has one of the most star studded casts of the decade, while also being one of the most action packed and most hyped films of the decade. Let's talk about it. This film was a 3 hour emotional, action packed, epic following Odysseus in his journey home after his victory at the Trojan War. It's already one of the most successful films of the year, tracking to break $1 billion very soon, with IMAX screens all over the country being sold out for weeks. Directed, written, and edited by Christopher Nolan, as well as being produced by Emma Thomas, and a great score from Ludwig Göransson. The Odyssey, in my opinion, is one of the best films of the year, and if you have not had the chance to see it, I suggest you stop what you're doing, look into finding a way to see it, and go see it, because I'm definitely going to get into spoilers in this video and just how much I loved this film. It's got one of the biggest casts of the year so far, and I'm certain a handful of these will walk away with awards come next year. Our main cast is filled with Matt Damon, Anne Hathaway, Tom Holland, Robert Pattinson, Lupita Nyong'o, Zendaya, Charlize Theron, and an even more stacked supporting cast with Benny Safdie, John Bernthal, John Leguizamo, Hamish Patel, Mia Goth, Elliot Page, Samantha Morton, Bill Irwin, Corey Hawkins, and Travis Scott. A basic premise of this film, it follows Matt Damon's character Odysseus as he leaves his throne in Ithaca out to the Battle of Troy, where he spends the film trying to remember what all him and his men conquered and went through in their odyssey to the Battle of Troy, winning that battle, and their long, long journey back home. We also follow Tom Holland's Melenicus and Anne Hathaway's Penelope as they are tasked with holding down the fort in Ithaca while Odysseus is away for over 20 years, and their struggle to for Anne Hathaway's character to remain on the throne and hold out for Odysseus to come home without having to find a suitor and remarry, as well as for Telemachus coming of age and fulfilling his own right to take the throne. Overall, first impressions, this was one of my most anticipated movies of the year. I'm a huge Christopher Nolan fan, and even before this came out, I sat down and rewatched all of his films leading up to it, and all it did was raise my anticipation. And with all that anticipation, I was not disappointed. This was one of my favorite films I've seen in recent memory. It's taken the top spot on my 2026 movies, and it's also in my top 3 Christopher Nolan films, which is a high bar. As of today, filming this video, I've seen this film 3 times. First in standard, second in RPX, which is Regal Cinema's premium format, and lastly, luckily today, I was able to find a seat to see it in 70mm IMAX, which was a game changer and just an incredible experience all around. Spoiler warning ahead, I'm about to fully dive into the story, plot, characters, and everything that goes on in Nolan's The Odyssey. So if you've not seen the film, please pause this video, find time to go see it, and hopefully you come back afterwards to check out the rest of this video. As for the story, we pick up in Ithaca as Travis Scott's character is retelling a song of the Battle of Troy, where we also meet Antinous, Telemachus, and Penelope in all of their different battles and searches for their own character in Ithaca now that Odysseus is gone. We also catch up with Odysseus as he is stranded with Calypso, and throughout the story, we start to understand more of why he's there, what's going on, and why he hasn't made it back home yet. Now, quickly to go over what I think is the main story. I say we have 2, maybe even 3 plot points that all kind of tie together in this film. I think we're going to start with Telemachus and Penelope's story and save, in my opinion, the best for last. Um, so Telemachus, like I said earlier, is now coming of age and is not known his father, but is trying his best to keep up with his teachings and spread what they call Zeus's law around Ithaca. Zeus's law is a rule that they all live by, in the belief that you should treat others how you wish you could be treated because you never know, another person could be a god in disguise. This law comes up multiple times in the film through Telemachus, through Odysseus, through uh, Menelaus, through Antinous, through the entire cast. It's a very important thing, and honestly, one of my favorite parts of the film. it had a lot of religious symbolism through my eyes, and how I think all people should be. Treat others the way you wish you could be treated, because you never know who they could be, or what consequences could come from you not being the best to them. As we continue to learn about Zeus's Law here, Tom Holland's character, who I thought had an incredible performance, one of the best I've seen in his career so far, is continuing to push Zeus's Law, and he's really been taken under the wing of his father's most loyal servant, played by John Leguizamo, who I think was great. My third time watching today, he really stole the show for me again today. Really picked up on a lot more and focused on his character a lot more, paid attention to him as much as I could. Um, and he was great. He plays a blind character, and he does it well. I think that's one of the hardest things to do in cinema. One of my favorite, Charlie Cox, has been doing it for years, playing Matt Murdock in the MCU, and I think he's set a high bar for it. But I believe, that bar was close to being met in this. As Telemachus is continuing to learn under Eumaeus, they continue to reminisce on Odysseus and the man he was, and everything he left behind in Ithaca. And one of the big plot points that comes up is Telemachus finds out that Antinous, played by Robert Pattinson, was left behind by his father to look after him and eventually look after Odysseus' wife. Antinous is one of the main suitors in this film, which is a group of people who have now invaded Ithaca in hopes of obtaining Penelope's hand in marriage once she decides to remarry, after losing faith in Odysseus ever coming home. I think all of the suitors played these roles amazingly. Robert Pattinson stole the show and is currently my pick to win Best Supporting Actor at the Oscars, as well as Corey Hawkins. I thought they both killed it. They both played just very mean spirited characters that it's very easy for the crowd and the viewer to root against. Um, and I think it's hard for such a beloved actor like Robert Pattinson to do so well in that. I was rooting the entire movie for Odysseus to come home and seek his revenge on these suitors who had made a mockery of his home and a mockery of Zeus's law. As we continue, Telemachus is constantly talked down to by these suitors, before he finally decides he is going to get his crew together, get a ship, um, and see what he can do to find out about where his father is. He sets to leave for Sparta, where he meets John Bernthal's character Menelaus, as well as his wife Helen, played by Lupita Nyong'o, both of which I think killed their roles. I've always been a big fan of John Bernthal, and I loved Lupita in this as well. Aside from all the unfortunate and negative controversy around her casting, which makes no sense. She was incredible, and no one I would rather cast in that role in this film. She had a ton of very intense and honestly scary moments in this film. She plays a set of twins, and as is a great trend recently, actors playing two roles in the same film. She was fantastic, as well as John in this. Their whole time together with Telemachus, he sort of takes him under his wing, and throughout this time in Sparta, Telemachus and Menelaus continue to talk and bond, and tell stories about Odysseus. Towards the end, Menelaus is almost scared that he's disappointed Telemachus, that he couldn't tell him where his father was. But a great scene, in my opinion. Telemachus was more happy that he found out who his father was rather than where he was. So he starts to head home, um, on his journey home, and takes a stop at Athena's temple, where we will pick up on later when Odysseus' story crosses over into that. Next, and what I call the second story and plot point of this film, we follow Odysseus and his army of men as they set off to make it home back to Ithaca after the Battle of Troy and their amazing victory that they had there. We start off with them leaving the Battle of Troy, and cut throughout the film to show the battle. And towards the end, we see its entirety and the devastation and tragedy that it ended up being. Um, they finally set sail and decide to go a different path from Agamemnon, who was their leader throughout the battle. him, played by Benny Safdie, as well as Menelaus, John Bernthal's character, head off on their own way. Um, and Odysseus is convinced they'll be able to take a different route, see some of the world, and make it home before Agamemnon. They first run into trouble right after they left. They take a pit stop at another island where they ransack a village and re up on rations before hitting the road or the ocean. Again, before they run into their first big issue where they settle down for the night to look for food and they spot a sheep. And Odysseus, as he's pushed in this film, is he knows that he can't be the strongest or the fastest, so he tries his best to be the smartest. Decides to bring his crew along with him to follow the sheep because he knows that sheep move in flocks, and where there's one, they're bound to find more and a better food source. So they follow these sheep into a cave, which they think is odd, but they realize that someone's living in this cave, and then they make cheese. They insist on keeping Zeus's law, and they say, "Hey, we'll welcome this guy back home, whenever he returns." And to their surprise, it ends up being a huge cyclops who comes home, and they're now trapped in a cave because the cyclops is the only thing strong enough to push the cave door, which is a boulder, back in. So they're trapped for the night. And this first night, the cyclops kills two men and eats them, and continues, a trend of each night, until they're able to escape, they lose at least two men to the Cyclops. And it takes a couple nights. Half the crew get out, and Odysseus comes back in to, help the rest of the crew and find a way to honor those that they have lost in that debacle. And one of my favorite parts of this scene and scenes in the movie is once they try to blind the Cyclops. I thought the sound design was incredible, especially seeing it in IMAX today. It shook the theater. It shook my chair. It was incredibly loud and haunting and frightening, and really, draws the viewer to almost feel bad for such a monster, a disgusting, hideous creature who's already killed and eaten two men following our protagonist. But it really shows a lot of emotion behind it. And they find out that the Cyclops can speak and speaks English. And they find out he is the son of Poseidon, as he is crying and praying to Poseidon after he is blinded, before they are finally able to make it out the next morning. And just before they're able to finally make it out, the Cyclops meets them at the exit, and he spits out one of the helmets of one of the men he ate. And Odysseus could not take that disrespect. He was already upset that he didn't have a good way of honoring his men and bringing their bodies with them to bury. He decides to shoot the Cyclops in the eye before they leave, and unfortunately, this causes them to lose a few more men on the way out. So they're back on the road now, back on the water once again. They're low on food. They're losing a lot of men. They're tired. They're thirsty. Take another pit stop, and another grand, epic moment. They come upon this forest, which ends up being kind of magically, woven in, kind of twisted a little bit, where they run into a civilization of giants who are very uncivilized and have no motive to communicate with them, to reason with them, to greet them, nothing, just strictly to kill them, maybe even to eat them. But their entire goal is, get these guys off our island and, spread as much death and killing and hatred as we can. And unfortunately, this moment, they came in with 3 ships. The giants take out 2 of their ships, so they're only left now with 1 main ship after these 2 big mistakes in their Odyssey home. In their trip home, it just continues to get better and better and more thrilling. I want to stop here and just say, the movie was so well paced. It was 3 hours long, and I know a lot of people don't want to go into and sit down through a 3 hour long movie. But every person I've talked to that's seen it, every person I've seen it with, has said the pacing is just incredible, and it doesn't feel like a 3 hour movie. It, if anything, feels like 2, maybe 2.5 hours. It's just, flies by and is paced so well. Coming up on this next part, where they stop on another island, and run into Circe, who, is a witch and has the power to mold bodies into animals. Odysseus' crew almost attempts a mutiny, and telling Odysseus, they've lost way too many men under his guidance and under his rule. They want him to stay back at the ship, and they'll go get food and bring it back. Odysseus being a good leader doesn't start a fight from this, but says, hey, give me your bow. No matter what, we'll have food. I'll find us something to eat. And he goes after chasing this deer, and Nolan does a really great job of lining both of these up. You see both parties figure this out at the same time. As, Odysseus is hunting this deer and coming up on the body of the deer, we also see his crew being welcomed into the home of Circe and fed, as we find out her ulterior motives, breaking these men of their disguise and showing their true nature, that they are pigs and disgusting, and that they have pillaged and killed through the entire world for Odysseus through a great emotional, great acting scene between Odysseus and Circe later about, the nature of men, the nature of people back when this movie was based on. Um, and trying to reason with her, and luckily before they go she gives him some more advice on where to go next, guides them towards Hades next, which is known as hell in this mythological sense, where Odysseus then is reunited with all of his fallen men and Agamemnon and Sinon, and hearing of their stories, how much they trusted him, and especially Agamemnon's horror of not the trip home, but once he got home, the betrayal that was waiting for him there. They're told by all these people in Hades now, the rest of the path home, that Odysseus's men, the gods, say they will not come home. They will not survive the rest of this trip, but Odysseus is stuck in his ways and he's ready to defy the gods because he's lost so many men, and if he can do anything, he's going to try and protect and save these last men that are with him and do whatever he can to prevent them dying on this journey home. They next head past the sirens and the siren song. One of my favorite scenes from the movie, especially the music that lines up with it. I think one of Ludwig's best scores, personally. Odysseus gets the rest of his men to fill their ears with wax so that they cannot hear the siren song and continue pushing on through the canyon. Um, Odysseus decides that as a leader, he brings it upon himself to put himself through the most pain so that his men don't have to. He makes his men promise him that they will not untie him from the mast and allow him to hear the siren song. Is accompanied with such a beautiful monologue from Matt Damon. Part of the quote is Matt Damon giving an incredible performance in telling about the siren song and how it's, everything you want to hear and everything you wish you had, and then it told you what you most want is what you can't have, and what you can't have is what you already had and lost. And ends off that monologue by saying, it told me that I don't really want to go home. Such an incredible scene, in my opinion. The music is incredible, the sound design is incredible, the acting is incredible. And one of the things I love most about this movie is so much of the practical effects that were used, how they actually filmed so much of these on the beaches, on ships. Even the Cyclops was somewhat practical effects, practical creature that they built. Um, Such an incredible scene. And after this, in their next part of the journey, they have to decide whether to risk getting through the whirlpool or going next to the Scylla, which they know will take 6 men. So Odysseus really has to balance out in his mind, is it worth risking all of my men to hope that, we can all survive this, or go through here and know that majority of us will survive, but 6 will die. Another frightening and extravagant scene. And, as we come towards the end of Odysseus's journey, after this, his men have really started to turn on them because he hasn't been fully truthful with them with what he's been told throughout the journey. So they land in their last island, which is the island that the sun god's cattle grazes on. And he has been warned that all of his men will die if they decide to slaughter the herd and eat any of his cattle. Odysseus tries his best to hold them out on it, make a pit stop, eat rations, but the wind keeps them on the island and unable to leave until one night he wakes up and finds his crew burning and eating one of the cattle just in time for the winds to lift and them to be able to leave before they are struck down by Poseidon's hand in a brutal and very hectic scene of the ocean and the harsh weather tearing their ship apart, and the rest of his men being lost at sea and dying, and only Odysseus floating adrift into what I consider our third main plot line. He is discovered and rehabilitated by Calypso, played by Charlize Theron, where she continues to feed him lotus flower, which is said to help move his pain purely to his physical and allow his mind to heal, allowing him to wake up and be rejuvenated quicker. It's a compilation of a lot of great scenes throughout the film that's also used to narrate his journey as he starts to recall and remember what happened to his men and where he has been the last 12 years. And we find out that Calypso has been holding him captive for 7 years now, as she has fallen in love with him and does not want him to leave. Before he finally, remembers Penelope and sets off to come home. Before now, he wakes up after being adrift as Athena meets him back at Ithaca, where he has finally come home and is able to finally reunite with his family, with his people. And his first visit once he is home is to visit his most loyal servant, Eumaeus, after he was brutally attacked by some of Antinous' men because they are off to intercept Telemachus, where Odysseus must now head while staying in disguise to save his son, who has no idea he's coming, and who has no idea that this man disguised as a beggar to save him is his father. In a great, intense moment in this temple where Telemachus loses mentor, but Odysseus finds him and helps him fight off these scoundrels who have come after him before they finally make the trip together back to Ithaca and devise a plan to rid Ithaca of these suitors and bring back Zeus's law. The entire third act, in my opinion, is just incredible filmmaking, incredible storytelling, incredible acting. It's just beautiful cinema, in my opinion. Telemachus comes home, brings together, this feast one last time before Odysseus, disguised as a beggar, makes his rounds, and you really see Antinous' true colors in the way he treats a lowly beggar and the way his men even start to turn on him slightly. Penelope finally puts her foot down and says that tomorrow morning at dawn, we're taking all the weapons out, locking the doors, and we'll have a final trial to find one suitor to finally marry me. She's ready to move on. And which is followed by an incredibly beautiful scene, which is Penelope believing she's sitting down and just meeting with the beggar and just hearing his story, where he pretends to be a veteran of the Trojan War and tell her about her lost husband, everything he did in that war. It's just a beautiful, incredible scene of him retelling and reminiscing on the Trojan War and all of the destruction that they caused there. A full scene that just gave me goosebumps and was a very, very emotional as he retells and comes to say that they destroyed Zeus's law and that they came to Troy and gave them a gift and broke the goodwill that they were trying to give to Troy, coming into their home and killing them and destroying them and pillaging. And in that moment, he believed that the home that he had left, Ithaca, could never be the same because of, the men and the evil that he's brought into the world and all the killing and destruction that he's brought. A very beautiful scene as he's joined by Athena as well. And one of my favorite, viewer interpretations of it, we see Zendaya play a temple guard that is being executed in front of Odysseus, which is up to viewer interpretation, whether you believe that, you know, these soldiers were killing Athena herself or that they were killing a temple worker at Athena's temple. And now, whenever Athena comes to Odysseus, she takes the form of the same worker that he watched be executed and really gave him this moral dilemma and third eye opening moment. And after Odysseus goes through his entire story, they're ready to start the final trial, which is a recreation of a trial that Odysseus was the only person able to complete back when he was king, which is being able to string his bow and shoot the arrow through 12 axes or 6 sets of axes that are lined up together and strike a bullseye behind them. What follows is a very intense scene of all of the suitors trying to do it themselves and realizing that none of them will ever be Odysseus, and that they accept that the queen has let them know that they will not be Odysseus, but she has to choose one of them still. And once all of the suitors have finally tried and failed, the beggar finally comes up and asks for one chance to do it, that he deserves a chance to at least come up and fail. With, once again, another beautiful moment of the score and just silent, jaw dropping moment as the suitors finally realize that this beggar was Odysseus the entire time, as he is finally able to string his bow and fire the arrow through all of the axes. And what follows is a great, probably 15 to 20-minute action sequence of Odysseus taking arms and killing all of the suitors, and taking back his home, with help from Telemachus, as one of Antinous' men tries to free all of the weapons that have been locked away. A very, you know, action packed, high intensity scene as Odysseus finally defeats all of the men, and kills Antinous and regains his throne before deciding that him and Penelope will be heading west to honor their men while leaving Telemachus the ruler of Ithaca. Now, that was a brief overview of the story and plot, and I still, suggest each one of you go see the movie for yourself. And there's so much more, that I wasn't able to touch on that was, just so important and just beautiful in this film, especially all of the characters and performances. Matt Damon, Anne Hathaway, Tom Holland, Robert Pattinson, just four out of this huge cast, which I thought were incredible. I thought Tom Holland, this was one of his best performances. I know a lot of people rag on him and say, oh, he's just Spider-Man. He's just, Uncharted, Spider-Man, whatever. I think he plays Spider-Man great. I think No Way Home was some of the best emotion he's ever shown. And the Odyssey, he really showed that, he can do serious roles and he can step up to the plate. And I think he was great. Matt Damon was incredible. I have no doubt he'll at least be nominated for Best Lead Actor. So much emotion, and I love how they told his story over, 3 time periods. There was, him in flashbacks, him throughout the Odyssey, and then him, what would be present day towards the end of the film, 7 years later in this, altered mental state. Anne Hathaway, I think this was one of the best performances of her career. I have to look into, I believe she would be up for Best Lead Actress. I think it'll be a tough running this year, but I think she makes a great case for it. So much emotion, and what I had wrote in one of my Letterboxd reviews was that she plays this character so well, you have no idea what's going to come out of her mouth, what kind of emotions are going to come from her next, in the best way possible. That, her character just draws you in so much that you have no idea where it's going. And last but not least, Robert Pattinson, like I've said earlier, I think one of the greatest young actors of our generation, of our lifetime. I think this is one of the best performances he's ever done, up there with, I don't even know, The Lighthouse. I loved him in The Batman, one of his greatest performances. And I believe, as of today, he is our Oscar-winning Best Supporting Actor. The rest of the cast was incredible. I think everyone really carried their weight. I don't think there was a weak point at all. Yeah, I think every actor was great. Every actor brought emotion and just great moments, memorable scenes, and great dialogue to this movie. The direction, the cinematography was incredible, especially seeing it on IMAX today. There was so many just huge, vast scenes that, are expanded on that new aspect ratio. And, you look at the screen and you see Odysseus that's just, this tiny bit of the screen, and the cinematography, the visuals of the movie were incredible. Christopher Nolan just has a way with storytelling and visual storytelling and character work that is just incredible. Just grateful to have seen this movie. Grateful for everything he's done for filmmaking. This was a masterpiece. Practical effects, again, so much of this was shot on scene, on location, as little practical effects as possible. I love that the ships were real. They filmed on these beaches. They filmed, on the island in, the palace in Ithaca. The Cyclops was a real prop. Even the giants were real people. Those were real scenes. I believe, obviously somewhat edited, but, as little editing as possible. Action choreography was incredible. Tom Holland had a lot of great action scenes early on and towards the end. Odysseus, obviously. The music, once again, one of Ludwig's best scores, up there with, he's got so many, up there with Oppenheimer. I love Tenet's score personally, up there with Black Panther, Sinners. I mean, The Mandalorian's a classic. As much as I love Hans Zimmer, he's my goat composer. Um, I'm happy to see Ludwig really come up and really make his mark and really compete with him for one of the best out right now. Message and emotional impact. I think this movie said so much about the state of the world, and how we have lost our way. We have lost our way with civilization. How people don't love each other and trust each other as much. People don't trust their neighbor. People are scared of their neighbor now. I think Zeus's Law was a great way to hammer that home and show that you know we're all in this together. Like, treat others how you wish you were treated, and life will be so much easier if you just do that. And all that Athena represented, and the way that Odysseus went out on his journey and came back such a changed man, through all the struggle and all the triumph. I just love the message and emotional impacts of this film. I mean, every time I watch it, there's multiple moments where I teared up, and just incredible. The music and the actors really connect with you, and evoke that emotion out of you. Strengths and weaknesses. Strengths, I think obviously a strength is it's directed by one of the greats of our time. Christopher Nolan is one of my personal favorites. I think the acting, the incredible cast, locations, the practical effects, the music, the storytelling. I don't have many notes on any weaknesses. As we get to weaknesses, I guess the runtime, I guess it does, kind of exclude the average moviegoer, even though IMAX screenings, from 7 a.m., 11 p.m. are sold out. The average moviegoer is going to see this movie, even though it is 3 hours long. If that's, our biggest weakness, I don't think that's much of a weakness. I've also heard that, the biggest draw for this film is the source material. Maybe that there's almost too much in the Odyssey and the Iliad that they had to cut out. I've heard that Nolan filmed a 4-hour cut of it, but unfortunately, IMAX cameras cannot stay on and run, or the projectors, I mean, the IMAX projectors cannot stay on and run for longer than 3 hours, so he had to cut out a lot of it. But I think that maybe some of the source material hurt it. Some people may find it repetitive, just constantly, okay, we're on this voyage and stuff keeps going wrong. Some people, may have ongoing biases against some of the cast, which I think is stupid. I think, film and art is for everyone. If you're going into a movie and, you dislike somebody for anything other than um, maybe who they are as a person or their acting skills, then I think you're in the wrong. I think, you shouldn't be watching film if you're going to let something as stupid as somebody's race, gender, sexual orientation, get in the way of you enjoying their artistic performance. That's just my 2 cents on the piece. Um, I don't have many weaknesses. That's all I have. Ratings and thoughts. 5 stars. 5 stars. Almost every single friend I have has given it a 5 star as well, and it's just been movie of the year. It So far this year, Project Hail Mary has been my number one film of the year. Odyssey has taken that over. I have it as my number one film right before Project Hail Mary and Obsession. And I also have it top 3 Nolan. I have considered, but have not found the time today to sit down and re rank it. It might be number 2 behind Interstellar. In my opinion, would be surpassing Inception, or potentially Oppenheimer, whoever I put at that number 2 spot. Overall thoughts, I think it can't be said enough how much of a masterpiece and just an incredible piece of filmmaking, and just history with this film being made and how it's being made. And movies aren't made like this anymore. Movies aren't made fully with IMAX cameras and getting so many actors and actresses to buy in and really, engulf themselves in these roles. And just the way this was filmed, just the vast everything, the creation of it. I think it's one of the best films of the decade. Let me know what you guys think. I'd love to sit down next and rank every movie that's come out this year that I've seen, or every Nolan movie or every movie of the decade, whatever you guys want. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope you guys have all had a chance to see the Odyssey. Please let me know what you thought of the video and of the Odyssey down below in the comments. Please like and subscribe. I appreciate it all, and I look forward to seeing you guys all soon in the next video. Thank you guys.